Well, hello, everybody. Anybody who's out there is listening. Happy Good Friday here in the United States. Very interesting day. Just got done spending probably about 4 hours doing yard work. Felt good. Cleaning up the yard, spring cleaning. Beautiful 70 degrees today and light breeze. No clouds in the sky, no chemtrails. Gives me a lot of time to ponder life and death. So I've been wondering, why are we afraid of death? It's very interesting in our society. So we're born, birthed from our mothers. Some births are easier than others. Mine was not. That sets up a whole conversation right there with what's happening between the mother and the father before the birth. Come back to that another time. But there's a few things that happen right at the moment that we're born or somewhere just before. I don't lock on and attach to some of these ideas, but I know they're out there. You come out and you get spanked, your first physical trauma. It's really a barbaric thing to do. Even birthing on the back, a mother on her back, is actually, my understanding, is not the way that it used to be done. It used to be done standing up and even in water, which makes total sense since the baby is in water when it's in the womb. Why not come out in water since it still has the cord connected? But it's just our Western medical system that's I don't have a lot of confidence in. But anyways, we get spanked. Somewhere in there, they cut the cord. And somewhere during that time, could be at that moment, could be afterwards, could be before, the soul enters the body. I've heard different theories about that, and it might happen 90 days before. It might happen right at that moment. I don't know. I'm one with the mystery. But the other thing that I do know that happens is we're given a death sentence. That's for sure. The moment we are born, the moment we are birthed, we get a death sentence. And we go through this whole life exploring this thing called life in a society that has in its mass consciousness this fear of death. And that doesn't mean I want to see people go out and whack themselves or whack somebody else. That's not the idea. The idea is the carrying around of this fear, deeply embedded in the mass consciousness. It's extremely unhealthy, I believe. And I've given a lot of thought to this over the last year or so. I don't know why. It's just one of those things. Pondering. Since at 66 years old, I do have more in the past column than I do have in the future column. But that's okay. We still got a lot of life to live. Yep. But why are we so afraid of death? Now, in the tribal communities, for example, Alberto Villoldo, Dr. Alberto Villoldo, the anthropologist, who has been spending an awful lot of his life down in the South American Andes mountains. He talks about how he was invited very young when he first started hanging out down there. He was invited to a death ceremony where somebody was basically laid out. This is what I would love to experience too. Somebody was getting ready to die, so it's conscious dying, which my mother did. I'm going to come back to that in a minute. But he went, and somebody was getting ready to die. They were surrounded by loved ones who were giving his spirit permission to leave the body. It's a beautiful thing. Don't fight it. Give the spirit permission to leave, and give it a way to leave, gently, quietly, peacefully, consciously. Now, this is very interesting. I learned this probably 4 years ago when I was listening to a lot of Dr. Vialdo's stuff. In 2009, November 2009 to be exact, my mother died. She was 87, and one day I got a phone call. One night I got a phone call from my sister. I was living in New Jersey. They were in Michigan. My mother got rushed to the hospital. I just knew something was wrong, so the next day I hopped a plane and flew to Michigan. And went and visited my mother in the hospital that afternoon. It was a Friday afternoon. She was in the ICU. She's wide awake, very conscious. And we were talking, and then she looked around in this room, and she said, just out of nowhere, I'm never getting out of here. And she knew. And I knew. And I didn't have to say anything. This was before my awakening, my spiritual awakening. In fact, it was a very big part of my awakening. That was on a Friday. On Saturday morning, the heart doctor, without our permission, shot her up with a bunch of drugs to try to help her. And she went into basically a coma for more or less 24 hours, completely unresponsive, just laying in this bed. And we were all there, me, my sister, my brother-in-law, and their 3 kids. And we couldn't talk to her because of what this doctor had done. I was not happy with this at all, this decision he had made on his own. But I do remember the next day, I walked in and she was wide awake. And what he had done basically was, by basically knocking her out, almost like an ayahuasca journey, but it was 24 hours long. And she went astral traveling. And one of my cousins said she even visited her because they were very close. But the next day, I talked to the resident that was in charge of her case, and he was very, very open with me. And I asked him, I said, what's the probabilities here? And I told him about what she had said on Friday. And he said, well, if it was my mother, given the condition of her heart, he said, if it was my mother, I'd move her to hospice. I didn't have a lot of knowledge of hospice at the time, but quickly came up to speed. And I looked at my sister. I said, I think this is the right thing to do, something along those lines, and we agreed. And about a day or so later, they moved her into the wing of the hospital where her hospice was. That was on a Monday or a Tuesday. And it was right after that she made this conscious decision to stop eating. And of course, every day, then she would get weaker and weaker and smaller, because you watch her after a while shrinking underneath the blankets. But there's a process that humans go through in this particular situation, which was new to me, but quite amazing to watch from a detached standpoint. She went through this process over the period of about 10 days that was truly amazing. And all of that started about a Monday or Tuesday. It was a week later when it was basically a week later on a Monday when she wasn't able to communicate anymore verbally. She'd gone through this process. There's a 2 or 3 day process of life review. I talked to the minister in the hospital too. And he said, yep, this is normal. Everybody goes through this. This was conscious dying is what I was witnessing. I didn't know it at the time. I didn't know it from any experience or anything, but I knew it in my heart what was going on and in my higher self. And the last 3 days, when she stopped talking, she would lay in bed and the eyes get really wide and kind of black, almost like shark. And she would start reaching up like somebody was there. Take me. And I sat there for hours at a time saying, Mom, it's okay to go. I said, I'm okay. Denise is okay. The kids are okay. It's okay to go. And I did that for 3 days while she went through this process. And then finally at the end, by about Wednesday or so, she had no strength left. It was just down to nothing. Fortunately, she wasn't in a lot of pain. They were giving her a little bit of morphine, but the nurse said it was very, very little. So it was very much conscious dying. And then on Thursday, I think it was like November 12th, got the call where she had passed. So my sister and I got to watch this whole thing. And that's how I want to go. I know that. That's how we all should go. Is conscious dying. And I know that in the tribal communities, since then, when I've studied a lot of Bialdo stuff, that's exactly what they do. They go through, they know when it's time to go. They accept that there is an end here, but that it's not actually an end. The Native Americans will tell you that there's no such thing as death. There's only a change of form or a change of worlds. And that really is all there is, because most of us is not in this material form. Most of us is in the spiritual form. And the spirit manifests the mind, and the mind manifests the body. This is why in the raw material they call it the mind-body-spirit complex. But in our society, we don't teach this. We teach that we have to preserve, do everything we can to preserve, because it's such a loss and such a sad moment when somebody passes to the other side. And yeah, it does leave a void, but we can prepare for that ahead of time. We can prepare our minds and our hearts for the loss of our loved ones, the passing of our loved ones, and the passing of ourselves. Wayne Dyer used to tell an interesting little kind of joke. He would say, picture the Earth from outer space, the blue ball, the blue pearl, right, as some people call it. That's what I like to call it. Picture the Earth from outer space, the way that NASA shows you. He says, and then now picture the Earth without you on it. And that's something we need to do. Because we're all going to go back to where we came from. Some of us are going to come back here again. Some of us are going to go other places in the galaxy. or in the universe. Who knows? Be one with the mystery. But just know that there is nothing to fear, because there is no end. We are eternal beings. And we need to learn to live consciously and die consciously. And once we do that, there's nothing to fear. Now, some people, if you study near-death experiences, they will come back without the fear. They know that there is nothing to fear because they've experienced it to a certain level. One guy I've listened to has experienced it at least 3 times. He's on Gaia. Can't remember his name. I can see him, but I can't remember his name. I know that I experienced numerous, what they might call deaths, or I call them crossovers. When I was down in Costa Rica doing the plant medicine ayahuasca, that makes for some interesting experiences. I did see my own death on one occasion, which was kind of interesting. It's very quiet too. But this is why some people like Graham Hancock some people think that everybody ought to be doing some ayahuasca at least once, but not everybody's ready, unfortunately. But there is just the ability to sit quietly and meditate and ask your higher self about life and death, and prepare yourself to die consciously. And the way to do that, very simply, is to live consciously every day. You need to have these conversations. Some people will think they're morbid or macabre, and they're not. Death is a part of life. And like I said, there's really no such thing as death. It's just passing from one world to another. So on Good Friday, I guess it's apropos to do this today, the day that Yeshua died, and then in 3 days was resurrected. I believe that is a metaphor for our existence here in this physical realm, that we need to die. This is one of the things that they talk about a lot when you're down in Costa Rica doing plant medicine ayahuasca. We need to die while we're here. And that means to die, you could call it the ego death, but to die and be resurrected from the animal soul to the divine soul, and to live in this existence as that divine soul, that spiritual being that we all are. And don't wait until the moment that we die to become that spiritual being again, but to do it now, while we're still here. So some people might ask, well, how do you do that? Well, everyone's got to find their own path, but there are tools, which is the subject of other videos. But the first thing to do is to make the decision that this is what I'm going to do. That I'm going to awaken and rediscover my true self. Not about finding anything, because it's not lost. It's right here. Yeah. You just have to reconnect with it. When we incarnate at that moment of birth, we pull a veil over the eyes and we forget who we are. We do that on purpose so that we can find our path back to here. This is all defined in things like the hero's journey and the tarot. The second card of the tarot is the veiled Isis, sometimes called the veiled Isis. Pull the veil. And you got to go through the journey of reconnecting with who we truly are. Some people do it very early in life. Some of us don't. But mine happened. My awakening started 6 weeks after my mother died. She died on November 12th, I believe it was, 2009. My awakening really began on January 2nd, 2010. It was the day I decided to stop drinking alcohol. It's funny how that works. I've thought about that a lot, especially over these last few years. What I've experienced over the last 4.5 years. And how these, almost call them rite of passages, part of these is we pass from one part of life to another. There can be some very powerful events that catapult us into the next phase. And that's what that was all about with my mother dying. That conscious death, and catapulting me into my awakening as a spiritual being. And that's where we are now, 14 years later. So, go inward and ask yourself, are you afraid of death? And why? And if you are, come to grips with it. One of the really positive aspects of that is that you will wake up, at least I do. I know for me, I wake up every day with this amazing appreciation of life and the abundance that I enjoy, and the breath and the strength and the food and the people that I meet, the ability to be of service to others. Every day there's a newfound appreciation for that. It gets stronger every day too. It's also this appreciation for Mother Nature. You can hear the breeze ringing the chimes as I sit here in my little Zen garden, as somebody called it, surrounded by pine trees and hickory and just beautiful peace and quiet. So I hope this was helpful. I hope that you find your own path and your own inner peace. so you can live consciously and die consciously and know that this is what was meant to be, and enjoy it. Thank you for listening. Be back sometime soon. Some more ideas and thoughts. Know that you are loved, and you are love inside. Right there. Aho.